This video is brought to you by Fallen Dominion Studios. Check out their website at fallendominionstudios.com. Hey there folks, welcome back to the Dice Odyssey. I'm Kaz, and today we're going to be talking about a really cool little card game called War of Supremacy, okay? It's by Lost Treasure Games. It's for 2 to 5 players. It takes roughly about 30 to 60 minutes depending on player count. It's going to be for 13 and up. And it's basically it's a kind of like a King of the Hill card game where you're in the world of Malor and you're a bunch of different rival gods. Think of like the ancient world stories, right? A bunch of rival gods that are actually competing with each other in a fantastical land, being able to summon creatures, cast spells against each other to try to win different kinds of territories in the game. This game actually has a kind of it's weird for me. It's kind of like a mix between a Smash Up, a little bit of Magic the Gathering, and any other kind of King of the Hill style game, Because it's a Kickstarter pre-production, some of the rules in the game are subject to change, even some of the possibly some of the artworks or certain aspects of the game. You know how Kickstarters are, things can change at a moment's notice, right, to hopefully improve the game. But anyway, let me go ahead and get you over to the table. I'll show you how it's played, and we'll come back with my final thoughts. All right, I'm going to give you a general rules overview just to get you into the game. Not going to cover every single rule. For one thing, some of these are probably going to be subject to change because it is a pre-production. But here we go. First thing is I've got all these different kinds of faction cards laid out, except for these. These are considered your mercenary creatures, okay? And if you look, let's show you the Atlan's faction. You see this right here, that's going to show you the faction symbol that they use. But if you notice, these cards do not carry them. These are considered mercenary creatures. You can use as many of these different types as you want of any kind of combination with any of the other faction cards that you actually use in the game, okay? So just keep that in mind. You've got those in the game as well. Each faction is going to have, strengths in different kinds of areas, and the rulebook will tell you all of that. This is going to be your territory deck, your creature deck, your combat card or combat form style deck, and then also your spell deck, okay? These are going to be the different kind of combat forms. For example, there's magic, there's blade, and there's wild. Now, how the setup is you're going to start off with 5 creatures, 3 spells in your hand. You got a hand limit of 10. If you have 10 or more cards, you cannot draw at the end of the turn, but at the end of every under normal circumstances, at the end of every turn, you're going to draw 2 back into your hand, okay? Whole purpose of the game is to try to win these territories, and depending on player count, if you win, I think it's 2 or 3, you win the game, okay? So again, you're in battle with other players at the table. Think of King of Tokyo. If you can survive with your creatures on this territory, defending this territory against all the onslaught of other players, you gain the territory, you win it, it goes into your point count, and that is considered one of your victory points. The first player is going to be basically taking this territory with a defense value of 0. So basically, whatever you play, you pretty much going to take the territory to start, whoever the first player is. And then from there, every other player is going to be coming against that first player's creatures that are actually on the territory defending, okay? Now, the basic way it's going to be played is you're going to draw a combat form card, and it's going to show you which combat form actually activates for you to be able to attack or defend with. In this case, it's going to be the wild. So, for example, if you take a look at the cards here, you've got special abilities at the bottom right, you've got your faction symbols at the top, but then you've got your combat forms on each card, and you've also got the type of creature it is here in the middle. Okay, now the way that you're going to be able to play is you can play 2 of the same, or however many of the same faction color that you've got, the same symbol up here, or it has to be the same beast. So for example, I could play these 2 cards if I wanted to, but I could also play, if I had this in my hand, these 2. Why? They're different factions, but see, they're beasts, okay? So that's what they're considered. So now I could actually go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and use, let's see, 2. I'm counting up how many of my wild I've got on each card. So currently I have an attack power of 5. That would also end up being my defense power unless this combat form changes, okay? So let's say, for example, I play with these 2. Now, again, I have to hold this position until it comes back around to my turn after everybody else has played. And if I hold it, I win this territory. Now the next player's coming in and they want to attack me and take the territory from my defense of 5 on the wild combat form, right? So they're going to take these two here, and look, they've got 2 plus 5 equals 7. All right, so if they go ahead and play those against my 5, they would naturally go ahead and or defeat me in combat and take that spot on the territory, and then they would be the people in defense, and at that point they have to defend it until their next turn, right? Where the game gets really interesting is going to be the spell cards. The creature cards are awesome, but the spell cards are going to be where things can really change up, because anybody can play a spell card at any time as long as they have the proper condition in the game. So for example, you have one here, the boomerang spell. If you, the player, gets targeted by an effect of a card, it now targets the owner of the card instead. Giant Slayer. All players must discard 1 legendary rated creature card, and we'll get into that here in just a minute. Ritual of Time. Pick up 2 cards from the deck and place it in your hand. Discard 1 card from your hand. So on and so forth. Fire Blast. This gets you rolling dice and dealing damage to creatures in combat. Counterspell. Somebody plays a spell against you, you can actually prevent that spell card from being played, sent to the graveyard. The cool thing is, anybody can play this at any time, even if it's not their turn. Switch. Now, this is one that gets really interesting. You can actually change the combat form to the next random one. So, for example, if I wanted to go ahead and play that, I now pull the next combat form out and take a look. Now, the combat forms that actually activate on the cards are Magic and Blade, right? So, no longer are my wilds activated. I have to use the others to defend or attack with. There's even a combat form that allows you to play all 3 combat forms, okay? So that could be some seriously massive damage, and it can also really, really make the game go faster, especially if somebody gets 20 or more points in combat. If they're the person on top, they actually win that territory. It's an automatic win in combat, so that's another way that the game speeds up a little. Now, you've got your legendary creatures here, which are pretty amazing. For example, you got this. Anytime you see a hammer up here, that basically means it's a legendary creature. So you got this guy here, he gains +3 magic, +3 blade every time a spell card is played while in combat. And that's going to come into play where these tokens come into play. You basically start adding them to cards that require them to show you if you're losing power or gaining power. That's what those tokens are basically for. And you got a ton of different kinds of legendary cards, legendary creature cards that can really swing the balance of the game in your favor. So anyway, in general, that's basically going to be how you play. As you go along, you're going to continue to fight with other players at the table. You're going to continue to have battles, and first person with the most victory points is the winner. Really enjoyed this game. Went into it with no expectations, hadn't known much about it beforehand, was asked to review it, and I said, okay. Went into it, really liked it a lot. And I'm somebody, I tend to like games like Smash Up, and I played a little bit of Magic the Gathering in the past, and it definitely scratches a little bit of those itches, right? It does several different types of things in this game. At first, I thought it was going to be more of a strategy style game, and yes, there is some strategy to be had, but honestly, it's more tactical combat, because really, you are incumbent, or you're basically... You have to basically take what's given to you out of the deck, and then you have to tactically think from that point on, what do I have? How can I use it? So that's key. Number one thing, though, the artwork on these cards is absolutely gorgeous. If you looked at the overview, I showed you a little bit of it, but man, that's going to be number one in this game. If somebody is coming over and they've never played this game before, they'll probably want to, just because of the artwork alone. It's absolutely beautiful. It scratches the itch on, production quality. Heck, I've got a pre-production copy here, and just about every single card I'm sitting here going, oh, I don't want to play you. I don't want you out of my hand. You're beautiful to look at. You feel that way. When it comes to mechanics, I really like the whole King of the Hill aspect. I like the idea, again, this is kind of giving me a little bit of that smash up scratch, but again, it's definitely a different kind of game where you're trying to win different territories, and you're basically, and the cool thing is the territories each have their own special ability that they grant you on the cards. That's awesome. Again, very smash up-esque. And then the one thing I will say, though, whereas in Smash Up, how you can sit here and you can play with, up to, I think it's 4 on the player count. I don't prefer Smash Up at 4 because there's so much on the table to keep up with. I prefer it at lower player counts. In this, I like it at pretty much almost any player count. Now, if you get up to 5 players, it does tend to run a tiny bit long, depending on if anybody's got analysis paralysis. Let's go ahead and get the negative out of the way. There's a little bit of math in the game. Yes, you are subtracting and trying to, subtracting and adding and things like that, and you're trying to overcome somebody else's points in the game to take over those territories to defeat their creatures. If you have anybody who's really prone to analysis paralysis, you might get a little bit of that in the game. But if somebody has played games, like I said before, like Smash Up or Magic or anything like that, then this is not going to be something that's going to be too hard for them to grasp, I don't believe. It's a very, actually, the good positive on it, it's a very simplistic style game, even though there's a little bit to work with, The cards, and when you first look at the cards, you're like, oh, that's slightly confusing, but really, once you understand the fact that the different kinds of combat cards, that changes the form of combat over time, it only makes you focus on specific ones on the card. That actually simplifies the game. Now, you can... one other thing that I like is that you can actually play different kinds of variants. I like the fact that you can actually construct the game kind of how you like to. You can take out the different kinds of factions that you don't want to play with, and you can keep the ones in that you do, right? And the cool thing I liked too was each faction had their own special abilities in a sense, right? They each kind of excelled at different things. For example, like I think it was the Arcane faction, they specifically excel at the magic stuff, right? The Atlans, they excelled at disrupting play. Well, and let me go on a little bit of a negative with that too. I did like every faction of the game. The blue faction, to me, while they did have some powerful cards, would be the weakest in the sense of play. And what I mean is enjoyment factor. There are several cards in there that actually make you skip a turn and things like that. And it's, skipping turns and stuff sometimes... Let's just be honest, nobody really likes those kind of things, right, in a game, typically. But they're there to cause chaos, right, that blue faction specifically. So thematically for the game it works, but I wasn't a huge fan of it. But like I said, it wasn't enough to hurt our enjoyment factor at the table. Because of the spell nature in the game, the fact that you can cast spells off turn, right, you can actually, if somebody else is in combat fighting somebody, trying to take over a territory, you usually stop those combats at times with different kinds of spell cards. You can affect the game even though it's not your turn. So really, that's another cool thing about the game is the fact that pretty much at all times everyone's engaged. They're sitting there, okay, I'm watching these people battle. I see that they're using these types of creatures against them. Let me see what kind of spell I might be able to throw in there to affect what they're doing and maybe give myself an advantage when my turn comes around. Really like that because, again, it keeps you fully engaged in the game. In a sense, it's hard to explain. It almost it takes away all the downtime because you are engaged. The thing I really liked about it was the fact that you could actually switch combat styles midstream, right? Somebody could play a spell card and actually if somebody went in with a strategy of using a specific type of combat, whether it's magic, wild, or I think it's blade, or a combination of those, and then they switch it, and hopefully if you flip another card and it turns out to be a completely different card combat, it might actually benefit the player who's throwing the spell down, and it hurts the player who's defending the territory. Another thing I also liked too was because of the fact that you have to count so much when it comes to comparing scoring results in battle. I like the idea that if you actually have, 20 or more points in terms of battle points, any given scenario, any given defense or combat, I love the fact that you automatically go ahead and win that territory. That just saves you from having to keep on counting, and it kind of speeds the game along, which is something I really thought was an awesome thing in this game. If you're somebody who likes good card combat, if you don't mind some good take that in the game, to where everybody at the table, you're kind of, you got this tension sitting there going, oh gosh, who's going to come and attack me once I start throwing cards down? Because it's like the minute you do something, counterspell, you got this card, you got this card, it doesn't even matter if it's the person you're fighting, right? It could be anyone at the table at that time. And so you're constantly in a friction and a tension with everybody at the table. And you kind of get into politics sometimes, because you're sitting there going, all right, look, man, please don't play a card on me, all right? Let me have this. I'll help you in the future. You don't necessarily have to have to hold those bargains, but it is kind of cool when you have a tiny bit of negotiation at the table, in a sense that's more like organic. It's not something that's necessarily built into the game. Check this game out on Kickstarter. This is definitely one I would want to keep in my collection. This type of game is a type I could see drawing people into this style of game, into the card combat style of game. This game is high quality. Definitely recommend it. Go check it out on Kickstarter. I highly recommend backing it. And Nathan Everett and Lost Treasure Games have a lot to be proud of in this package. This is a ton of fun, and I really don't think you'll be disappointed if you like this style of game. Absolutely amazing. So thank you again for watching the Dice Odyssey videos. I'm Kaz, and please check us out on Facebook. Check us out on Twitter at the Dice Odyssey. Please like and subscribe. And hey, we put out videos pretty regularly every month, and we just would love to continue to provide more great content for you. And if you liked it, please leave a comment down below. Would this be a game that you're into? Have you ever played Magic the Gathering? I mean, goodness, so many people I know have. So have you ever played Smash Up and games like that? Let me know down in the comments, and thank you again. You have a blessed day. Hey, game away.